coming at you. Okay, in the game. So for today, I'm doing a little bit of a what you might call a talking head video. Although I'm not going to show you my head or the face that's in front of it, on the front of it, because I want to have like a job. So I've kind of been in this process of I'm playing the game just a little bit more these days, and I'm going to stop like shortly. But while I'm playing it, and so I've been in this process of for a while now. Even though D2R is 2 years old, oh my god, the glacial trail is so terrific. I'm actually still in the process of like slowly moving stuff over from my old Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction stuff and adjusting to the changes of D2R. And I just wanted to make a video kind of explaining some of my thoughts and reactions as I do this. So, and in particular, like building Infinity, which by the way, I made that last video, and at first I was like, oh, this is not that big, not that much faster than like the Crescent Moon. It's so much faster. It's so much better. It's crazy. I have never had an experience as I had with this self-wheel build. I have never been able to just roll through Player 7 content. Just mow things down in Player 7. Just absolutely murder things. I've never had that experience like I've had with this build. So it is incredibly powerful. And obviously, I have like the resources for it that I've built up over years now. This is my single player account that I have had for many years that I quit, I come back to it, I stop, I come back, Anyway, but so I just want to talk about my reaction to kind of D2R and and as I adjust my builds, I keep running into the same kind of thought and feeling, which is that my builds are getting a little more boring. I want to start this video. This is a bit of a shout out to this YouTuber, this guy DoubleBilly. DoubleBilly does in his videos. He does off meta builds, which he thinks up and are like very creative and cool, and he comes up with them and I don't know, they're fun to watch. And so that's just a compliment to him. And I once was on his live stream. He said that he used to watch my videos, and I just want to say my videos, my builds were creative only insofar as I was limited by what you could make in Diablo 2 vanilla. I couldn't make Infinity, and they were limited by what I had, and these days I have quite a few resources on my single player account, but this is all single player self-found. So I have a lot of things, but not everything, So to the extent that my builds were creative, it was only because of certain limitations. His build, he's creative with no limitations. I can't really think up the things he does, and frankly, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's a cool thing he does, but I just get this sense that my builds are becoming more like, look at this build. This is my build, and it's good, but it's good because it's the absolute cookie cutter thing. And I just want to say that I just want to talk about kind of the D2R and some of the problems that maybe were in the game and may remain in the game or may have been created by D2R. So a couple points here. So prior to D2R, there were a couple problems in the game, and one was things people had an issue with. One was immunities, and relatedly, the other thing was caster melee balancing. But the first thing I want to say about this is immunities. This problem, a lot of people had complaints about it, but my question is, was it really a problem? So in my thought, immunities were introduced, and my thought was that this was a deliberate choice to balance the game around hybrid builds. Okay? Every caster, to get around immunities, you'd have to develop 2 sources of damage at least, right? And so most casters can do that, Blizzard Nova Sork, Meteorb Sork, Javazon, and these were a lot of builds that I had on my Diablo 2 Vanilla. Javazon, Freezing Arrow, okay, but of course there were certain problems. Like, for example, you can never really. I always want to do a hybrid trapper, lightning fire trapper. It doesn't work. It didn't work anyway. And so certain things they did in D2R, like buffing certain skills, were great. These were great changes. But more on that later. So prior to Diablo D2R, so you had hybrid caster builds. I thought this was at least the idea, the overarching idea. And you had that contributed to caster melee balancing because melee there's fewer physical immunities. Okay? So they do less damage, but they run into fewer immunities. Okay? So this was part of the whole idea. Was it imperfect? Yes. Highly imperfect. Okay? And you may know and be thinking right now that one glaring exception to this hybrid build meta that supposedly existed at a certain time, you'd say, no, not really, because of the Hammered In. And yes, that's kind of true. That was a glaring and huge, gigantic exception, and kind of it blew everything else to the water. So what did they do about it? So the other thing, so they made Infinity. But Infinity didn't really solve any of those balance problems because Infinity kind of just made it only really helped lightning builds, because the conviction aura on Infinity is only powerful enough to break lightning immunities. So then you had this state of the game where it's Hammered-Ins plus Light Sorks and I guess Javazons for cows. But basically, those were your two things. And people were complaining about this, with reason. I mean, when you play the game, you want to find items and you want to play efficiently, You can't escape that desire. So they created, so that was the state of the game, and that was a challenge for the game. And, what did they do about it? Well, we all know they did Sunder charms. And there was a lot of discussion about this, and I'm not trying to, be an old cranky guy. I kind of think it was not a terrible solution, but I don't think it was maybe the best solution. I think what they should have done maybe is, first of all, like what I just said about conviction only breaking lightning immunities. Why was that so? Why did they do that? I don't understand why cold immune monsters have a cold resistance of like 180, but lightning resistant monsters have a lightning resistance of like 135. What is the point of that? It doesn't make any difference until you have the gear to break it, and then some builds, and then it could break for other kinds of immunities and not others. I don't know why they did that. I think my solution to the immunity thing may have been something like drop all immunities to like, you'd have to do more testing than I can really think. You'd have to think about it much more carefully than I am in this video. But what if you dropped it all to like 135, and then you allowed things like Griffins, allow this to work on that 135? You could have this and some facets, or maybe it would just be 120. I don't know. So you could have this. I'd allow probably equipment gear. I'd allow this to work on it 1-to-1, and then I'd have skills working on it at like, maybe you'd have to do, well, then at that point, what's the difference? But like 1/5. Do the 1/5 thing from skill-based minus resistance, and allow, gear-based minus resistance to work 1-to-1 for that immunity. So the conviction would work at 1/5, and this would work 1-to-1, and you could have some facets. And, then you'd have a monster that's tough to defeat, but not impossible if you wanted to go the breaking immunity route. I still kind of think that a meta in which hybrid builds are the thing is preferable, but I understand that the hammered in maybe kind of killed that, you know? Anyway, but so they did the Sunder charms, and it's not that bad because it drops, it drops the immunity to 95, which is almost somewhat similar to what I'm talking about, and it imposes a cost of minus light res, and it's not that bad, but the way that it is a little bit bad is I think it's a little more powerful than the solution I was suggesting. So in my mind, the thing that's bad about this is that it kind of defeats any reason to ever make a hybrid build, you know? And in the rare cases where you do have a hybrid build, like for example, and I don't know why people do this, but like an Oradin that runs both dragons and dreams, or something like that. Like they just have two Sunder Chimes, although they have conviction, so maybe you don't need it. But so to me, that's kind of a just kind of a loss that you no longer ever feel like making a hybrid build is a smart option. You never need to do it. You just can always go all in on one damage type. And the other thing about this is caster melee balancing. I think Sunder Charms made that worse. It made it worse because dropping monster immunity to 95 is just simply not an equivalent benefit to casters versus melee builds. All right? Casters have access to such a variety of equipment that has minus resistance. And in fact, casters have facets. You have facets. Okay? So even if you don't have minus resistance gear, you have facets that have minus resistance that you could put in any piece of gear. You could take a white item and here's all these facets I have, and I think I have a few more floating around, maybe on another character. But you could take a white crystal sword and put 6 facets in it. And in some builds, that's almost best in slot. I mean, it's so that's just, so it's not an equivalent benefit to drop their resistance down to 95 for caster and melee builds when casters have such a greater variety and more powerful tools for dropping that resistance even further. Whereas melee builds are still locked into the same methods that they always had. Thresher's Toll, amp damage, Atma's Wail, what's that amulet? I mean, Cranium Basher has a chance to cast amp. Certain rare weapons have a chance to cast amp. There's not, and then there's elemental damage, of course, but it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard for a melee build, if you've ever tried it, to really boost up their elemental damage. There's rune words like Famine. It's pretty expensive. It doesn't have Crushing Blow. There's it's kind of hard to do it from charms. Azarath is a great weapon, but it also has some other again, no Crushing Blow, things like that. So to me, the tools to deal with immunities or even highly resistant monsters is just nowhere near equivalent. So this part of the video so far has just been kind of like a lament as to why, maybe they should have done it differently. And I understand, Infinity is end game. It's very expensive. I understand the point. You can play the game however you want, but you want to play efficiently, do you not? It's a little tough. I make melee characters and I have fun playing melee characters. I have more fun playing melee characters personally. To me, that's part of the balancing, is that melee characters are more fun. And there's other parts of caster melee balancing to think about. For example, I think the buff to find item was a terrific way to balance caster and melee. Barbarians are one of the best magic finding builds because of find item, because you kill slower, but you get more out of it, okay? But other builds don't have that kind of thing. It's only barbarian, of course. So, and there's other things like there's certain niche uses like Ubers. Only melee builds, for the most part, do Ubers because you can, have a paladin that casts life tap from exile or Drax, things like that, and it helps you keep alive. So, that's there's something to that. That's part of the balancing. But anyway, so I just think it's kind of a little too bad that, I feel like my hybrid builds they're just not as much of they're just not as much of a good thing. The only build, they buffed kind of everything in D2R, but maybe my only build that got worse was this Fishyzon. That was because they took away one of the synergies to either to Power Strike, I think. So my Power Strike got a little Charge Strike rather got a little weaker. It's kind of too bad. And so I have this character, and I'm probably just gonna remake it as a straight Lightning Javazon because why wouldn't I? Because I found another Griffins from Terrorized and Dariel because I have, look at this, perfect. And I have 5/3 in this guy, and I actually finally found another Light Facet somewhere. What the hell? But I'm probably gonna remake this, and then I'll take my almost perfect Nightwings, and I'll put it on a Blizzard Sork that's completely 100% Blizzard. And that so I don't know. It's kind of too bad. So I guess my question is, what do we do about it now? Isn't there? I don't know if they'll do anything more in the game. And I'm not saying everything they did was bad. I think, a lot of things like Flickering Flame was good. I think the Sunder Charms have been very kind to fire builds. I think that's pretty, I think that's great that more fire builds are viable. But I don't know. Maybe there was more they could have done by adjusting resistances, maybe adjusting the number of monsters that are immune to each kind of element. But I'm just wondering, one thing, that maybe going forward we could do is, people have been complaining about melee balancing for a long time. One thing maybe we could do is give melee builds a few more tools to think about how can we change the game to give melee builds a few more tools for dealing with physical resistant monsters. For example, or giving them splash damage. One thing that I'd like to see is, for example, this, there's a very few weapons that give chance to cast static field on striking. When you make a Nova Sork, you realize a high level static field is incredibly strong. So here we have a 7% chance to cast level 13 static field. Why not level 30? 10% chance to cast level 17 chain lightning. I don't know. Why not 40? Why not have some of these chance to cast spells have serious damage? I don't think there's much danger of having a fully synergized Sork. Maybe if you had like a Dream Bear Sork with Crescent Moon as a weapon, maybe a level, 80 million chain lightning would be a little too high, but I'm kind of just spitballing. But that's something that you could do to give melee builds a bit more splash damage, is the static fields, some of these CTC things. And I guess it's all CTC are my ideas. What if you allowed amp damage percent to cast amp damage to spawn on gloves, rare gloves, or rare rings, or rare amulets, things like that. And, what about, is this a crazy idea? Could you have a physical damage facet? Would that be crazy? What's the difference, really? Why not magic and physical facets? Why is it only elemental builds, which are like so far ahead anyway? I don't know why. Is this, because you could have said once upon a time, there's so few, physical resistant monsters, this or that or this. It's kind of, it's pretty far out of whack right now, And this is my other problem with the whole thing of the Sunder charms and the Infinity. I'm not sure Infinity should have ever been in the game, but I'm kind of trying to take things as they are. You know, maybe we should have. Maybe the original thing was way back when we should have nerfed Hammerdins. You should have nerfed Hammerdins, and you should have never put it in Infinity, and you should have never put it in Sunder charms. And, you know, maybe I'm a crank. Maybe I'm just like one of these cranks. But, like, you know, because the other thing, some people complain about the game's too easy. Well, you know, it's easy because there's been power creep. If you play Diablo 2 vanilla, like, you start a character on single player, go through the game, it's not actually that easy a game. It's like, it gets pretty hard at times, you know? And you gotta farm shit, and, you know, and it's not that easy. But when you have all this kind of crazy shit, it's easy. So, I don't know. Those are just some of my ideas of, like, you know, the state of the game. What were these changes good or bad? I guess it's just a discussion video. I'm just spitballing, and I'm probably talking way too long already, so I'll cut it there. And let me know what you think, to the 4 people who watch these videos and might comment. You know, and let's try to have a constructive conversation. You know, if they ever make changes to this game again, what could they change to actually help things? I understand. I'm not a crank who says we should go back. We're not going back. I get that. I think D2R had a lot of positive changes. But some of these things have, you know, they have their own consequence. They knock things off kilter in a new way. Okay? You know, so, you know, but anyway. Framing the discussion for the one person who might want to discuss this. Okay. Anyway, to people who do watch, I don't know. I've made a couple videos recently. I actually really appreciate people saying nice things, people who watch. I understand my videos are too long, and I'm literally just standing in town, and it's like a podcast. Sorry. Okay. Catch you.